Stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag. Roll call, all present that are on it. We're still short one, aren't we, John?
That's correct. We're still short one member. We are accepting applications.
Review agenda for September 12th, 2023. Is there any additions or deletions?
No, sir, not tonight. Not for me.
Any motion to approve?
I have motion to approve. Second that.
Got a motion, a second to approve the agenda. All in favor, so saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed with all. Review of April 8th, or August 8th minutes.
Mr. Chair, I've got a couple of questions on it. Second page, 2, 3, fourth paragraph. Buzz Lake. I think that's supposed to be Pleasant Lake. See that?
Yeah, you're correct.
Okay. And then third page, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 10th paragraph, the Iowa Industrial District, is that, what is Iowa supposed to be in there? Industrial District, is that?
I don't believe so. Forgive me, I'm trying to keep up here. I'm navigating Zoom as well, but I don't believe Iowa is supposed to be.
Thank you.
Forgive me, I'm trying to keep up here. I'm navigating Zoom as well, but I don't believe
That would be my only questions. My only questions. Motion to approve the minutes?
Motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Got a motion, a second, approve minutes. All in favor, saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed with all. Bay Park Planning Commission will hold a public hearing at City Hall, 13th Avenue North at 6:30 or soon thereafter on Tuesday, September 12th, to hear the following request. Request of Coburn's Incorporated for preliminary and final review of Park Square Plat 5. The property is legally described as Lot 2, Block 1, Square Part Plat 2, according to the record of plat. Intersection of Highway 23 and 8th Avenue. Public hearing opened at 6:33.
Chair Jansky, Planning Commission members, again, this is a request being submitted by Colborn's Inc., property owners there of those three parcels for preliminary and final plat review of Park Square Plat 5. That's what they're titling this. Pretty straightforward. This is the three parcels that are currently home to the convenience store at the corner of Waite and 2nd Street South, as well as Colborn's liquor store. What they're just doing simply is reconfiguring that into from three parcels into two parcels, kind of splitting it down the middle, essentially kind of cleaning up the property, so to speak. The property is located since along a state highway. It is something that's subject to review and comment from MnDOT. So we've been in touch with them. They have submitted a comment and are waiting for just a slight revision from the surveyor. Then they'll prepare and authorize the road certification for that. I received those just early this week. They weren't reflected in the report from Friday when this was completed, so I didn't include them in the packet, but just a nominal comment from MnDOT. The properties were previously platted, so there is no requirement for any payment in lieu of parkland dedication with this request. Just pretty straightforward in this case. I'm supportive of the preliminary and final plats as submitted. preliminary plat with the condition that their property is subject to any requirements set forth by Minnesota Department of Transportation as part of their review and certification process. Provided that that condition is satisfied, I would recommend approval of the final plat as well.
John, then the new title of it will be Park Square Plat 5, consisting of 2 parcels?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
This is a public hearing. Does anybody have any input, yay or nay for it, or would like to ask questions? If you could, step up to the podium.
I'm going to unmute folks here on Zoom as well if they have any comments.
All right, hearing no comments, I make a motion to close the hearing.
I'll second that.
Got a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, passed with all present at 6:36. Commissioners got any questions or discussions?
I'd make a motion to approve the preliminary plat with the following condition. Whether it's subject to any requirements set forth by the Minnesota Department of Transportation as part of their review and certification process. So if that's satisfied, I would move that we approve.
I would second that motion for approval.
Motion is second to approve with conditions of MnDOT. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Passed with all present.
Council members, anyone in the audience, we expect that request will go to the city council likely for their Monday, September 25th meeting for final review.
Next public, Way Park Commission will hold a public hearing, City Hall, 19 13th Avenue North at 6:30, soon after Tuesday, September 12th, 2023. Here request of MLT Partners and Johnson Materials Inc. for a 5-year extension of an existing interim use permit for extraction and mining in an A1 agricultural residential district. The property lies on Granite View Road. Park. Public hearing opened at 6:38.
Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members, anyone in the audience or watching at home or online this evening. Again, this request has been submitted by MTL Partners and Johnson Materials for an amendment to an interim use permit for extractive use and mining to extend their interim use permit to allow continued removal of granite in an A1 agricultural rural residential district. This property was previously approved as a 5-year interim use permit in 2018, and an amendment to expand the quarrying areas and quarry materials within city right-of-way was approved in late 2021, just a few years ago. At the initial time of approval in 2018 for that 5-year term, which of course is running out at this point, the intent was that the removed granite would largely be used for the I-94 reconstruction project, with the added benefit of making the property potentially more viable for eventual development by removing problematic granite outcroppings and surface granite which hinder development. At the time of the initial approval, the applicants also received approval of a variance to reduce the setback for quarrying from the property line to 0 feet, so they could potentially mine up to the public right-of-way. Then, as I just referenced, in late 2021, the amendment was approved for limited quarrying within city right-of-way and to expand the quarry areas to include the teardrop parcel, it's commonly referred to, nearby the roundabouts in that location, kind of right here on screen if you can follow. As the permit is set to close in 2024, I know that's not, that's past that 5 years from 2018, but the way the approval is configured is that the actual work wasn't expected to start until 2019, so that's the way those numbers work. As the permit was set to close in 2024 and the approved quarrying areas have not been fully utilized, the applicants are seeking a 5-year extension to allow for additional time to work through those approved areas. Not looking for any modifications to the existing interim use permit or further expansion or changes of the approved areas. The request is solely to extend the approval for additional 5 years at this time. We have not had any major issues associated with the ongoing work at the site, and the applicants have worked in good faith with the city when we've had a minor issue or two come up diligently to resolve those. I don't have any concerns with the request as it came up. I did have someone left a voicemail today. I wasn't able to catch up with them, but they did express some concern with property on the other side of the highway of Highway 15 and what they believe could be potential impacts there. But the only time we had a complaint from that area was several years ago, and we looked to the blasting records that the applicants and the operators maintain as part of their initial approval. And the blast event from the day of the complaint was well within bounds of the kind of that criteria we used to judge. So there was no determined anomaly in the blast that day. So we considered that issue closed, and that was reported back to the property owner at that time. I've not, up until today, I hadn't received any further complaints of that nature at all. Per the request made by the DNR and Stearns County staff during our previous work on the amendments to the quarrying and mining ordinance that was made within the last year. The actual ordinance just recently adopted the last few months, but some of those lines of communication that were worked out over the last year. I did provide notice and information regarding the request directly to a list of several DNR and Stearns County staff with their request for review and comment and information regarding the public hearing timeline. To date, I've not heard any comment back from anyone that received the information regarding the request. As the standards for granting an interim use permit follow criteria for conditional use permitting per city ordinance, I did tuck those in with your packets for reference as well. I am supportive of the request and that all current conditions of the previous approval continue to be in effect and the site maintained and operating accordingly. I am proposing an additional condition just regarding a requested curb opening that the applicants are looking for onto the teardrop parcel I referenced for quarrying purposes, just to kind of clean that up if and when it's completed, if it's not needed. So I would recommend approval of the extension to the interim use permit as with the following conditions. Number 1, all conditions of the previously approved interim use permit and subsequent 2021 amendments continue to be in effect. Number 2, interim use permit for mining quarrying activities shall terminate April 1st, 2029. Excuse me. All mining and quarrying activity must cease at that time. Reclamation activities shall be complete by April 1st, 2030. Additional renewal may occur subject to processes established by City Ordinance Section 52. No tacit or inferred approval of renewal is established by granting of this extension to an interim use permit. And lastly, number 3, just regarding the curb opening. Any curb opening or curb cut utilized for the teardrop parcel is subject to approval by city staff and shall be removed and restored to previous condition upon completion and reclamation of the area unless an approval is granted by the property owner for it to remain with intent to be utilized for further development. Those being my suggested conditions, I would wrap up my report and open for questions from the Planning Commission.
This is a public hearing. If someone would like to comment or have a question, come up to the podium, state your name, and
I would add, just for anyone we have several folks on Zoom as well. Anyone that wishes to speak on this item, you're certainly welcome to, but you'd have to unmute and speak into your mic if you need to.
Seeing no comments, I would make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second that. Got a motion and a second to close public hearing. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Public hearing closed at 6:45.
Mr. Chair, or John, the proposed operation plan talks about quarry areas A, B, C, and D. The map that I received only shows A and B. Am I to understand that the only addition to the quarrying site will be the teardrop between the lanes of highway? I mean, between Granite View and Highway 15? That's the only additional?
Well, the additional sites were previously approved in 2021, so they already have been seen by the planning commission. This does not have any additional sites with it. It's solely the timeline. I apologize if I missed the map in there that had the clearly listed quarries. I must have gotten it crossed up. My apologies.
That's fine.
But the teardrop is one of those, and there's another site that's a little bit westward of that. That's their secondary site, but no expansions, nothing changing, just solely letting them work through for a while more.
Just wanted to be on the same page. Well, there are no concerns, and we haven't had issues with it so far. I guess I would move for approval of the extension of the interim use permit.
With conditions stated by John.
But with the conditions that are stated, correct?
I'll second that.
We got a motion and second to approve with conditions stated. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Passed with all present.
Planning commission members, if I could just take a moment, I'm just gonna work with the computer a little bit. I saw a chat from on our Zoom from someone. I don't know if the information that's on screen here is being relayed through the TV. They mentioned that their screen was black. I'm just gonna take a look here quick. Forgive me while I navigate this a little bit. Oh, it looks like it's working okay now. Hopefully just a glitch. Right, my apologies, so we can continue on, thank you.
Wake Park Plan Commission will hold a public hearing, City Hall, 19 13th Avenue North at 6:30 or soon thereafter, Tuesday, September 12th, to hear a request of Thomas L. Ardoff Revocable Trust and Susan R. Ardoff Revocable Trust for variance from city ordinances, section 52.56 solar and wind electric generation facilities, including request to reduce setback requirements per section 52.56, subdivision 4A and section 52.56, sub 4.A3, and section 52.6, subdivision 4A4, to facilitate future potential interim use permit request for solar electric generation facility. Public hearing opened at 6:49.
Mr. Chair, Planning Commission members, folks in the audience or watching at home, just a note for this request. As far as the public hearing component, after I wrap up kind of my report and questions and answers with the Planning Commission, the applicant has requested an opportunity to go through a kind of a brief PowerPoint that they prepared. It's not the norm, but when we have folks that do that, I typically try to accommodate that. So I don't have any issue with that. We'll welcome you to come up and I can run through your PowerPoint on the screen here, and you can just kind of navigate me. We do have it online, so I will be able to screen share it with folks online on behalf of your request as well, and hopefully folks at home will be able to see it without issue too. But I just wanted to give you a little heads up on that. It's a little bit out of the norm for us. This request has been submitted by Tom and Susie Ardolph as property owners with support from Dakota Sun Capital LLC and Parcel Real Estate as part of their application. The request is being made for several variances from what we refer to as the Solar and Wind Electric Generating Facility Ordinance, 52.56. Namely, request to reduce setback variances as established within that ordinance to facilitate future potential interim use permit requests for establishment of a solar electric generating facility. I just wanted to make sure I clarify, this is not a request for the actual facility itself. This is just a request that could accommodate that if it would ultimately be approved in some format. If a variances were to go forward, we would still need to see the actual separate interim use permit application process. So that would follow at some point if variances would be approved to some degree for this request. This is not a one and done situation. However, should necessary variances be ultimately be denied, then there would consequently be no opportunity to submit the interim use permit application, as the subject property requires variances in order to be eligible in any capacity for the interim use permit. The applicants have submitted a fairly extensive application packet, and I commend them for the thoroughness and thoughtfulness that they provided within that. Their information was very much appreciated and helps staff with our consideration. Due to the extent of the information and the rationale outlined by applicants, I did opt to enclose it in its entirety for your review and consideration to ensure that you're able to use your judgment as well, with the exception for redaction of personal contact information. The same will be done for city council as well as we would do for any of these requests. At the request of the applicant, we did also extend an invitation via email to planning commission members for opportunity to meet personally on site on a one-on-one basis to review the property firsthand with the applicant if you chose. Of course, not able to meet all at once on site, as that would be considered a public meeting, and we'd have to notice that ahead of time accordingly. Just a little bit of history, and I should reference on screen as well as the property, the totality of the subject property. I'll scroll down a little bit to the proposed areas of the variances in mind. They did present two options. This would be the first, option 1, and then option 2. You can see both options are located to the north of the grove of trees that would be retained. A little bit of background on the request. Staff was contacted previously by applicant partner Dakota Sun Capital staff regarding interest in the property and advised of the current ordinance and that a proposal would require significant variances from the solar and wind facility ordinance, but I did express a potential openness for consideration of a project that could locate primarily in a previously identified wetland area located on the same parcel on the western side of County Road 137. Our solar wind ordinance notes that solar facilities shall be designed and located in such a way to utilize existing lowland and wetland areas that are otherwise non-buildable in their current condition and to avoid agricultural and otherwise developable area. As utilities are available to the subject property, a memo from City Engineer Dave Blommel was enclosed for review. Staff and the city have held previously that the farmed and tilled areas of the property are considered serviced and developable, although applicants have disagreed with that assertion. Applicants are requesting variances with consideration of the two design options. As I mentioned on screen here, we have design 1 and design option 2, located a little more south and follows the contours of the tree line a little more. However, both options as presented would require variances from the same 3 ordinances regarding setbacks, although to varying degrees for both options. more specific details for both design options were contained within the application packet under section 4. The applicants have noted that they believe that the location of the design options combined with maintenance of existing tree cover and eventual additional screening as required by the ordinance should an interim use permit ultimately be pursued, would address the intent of the setbacks as outlined in ordinance in attempting to limit impact to neighboring properties. For those that may not be familiar, and as a refresher, since it's been a few years even for Planning Commission, the existing solar, wind, electric generating facility ordinance was adopted in early 2019 after considerable review and input, including public input opportunities, due to concerns with ongoing interest in solar farm projects in the western area of the city and their potential long-term impacts on future developments, as well as ongoing concerns brought forth to staff from residents in the areas where such facilities were located. I did include a copy of that ordinance just for reference because to date, we haven't had an application for anything underneath it. So frankly, I just wanted to ensure that everybody was able to look at it and review it beforehand as well. I would note that specifically stated intent of the ordinance in subdivision 1 is, quote, to regulate location of solar and wind generating electric facilities within the city of Waite Park and guide their development to areas which are most appropriate given their conditions, and to limit impacts of such facilities on adjacent residential properties. And as referenced earlier, subdivision 4D states that solar facilities shall be designed and located in such a way to utilize existing lowland wetland areas that are otherwise non-buildable in their current condition, and to avoid agricultural and other developable areas. Staff indicated that previously with applicants that should a variance request be made, a strong preference for any consideration for variance would be associated with utilization of the wetland area or areas to guide impacts away from the remainder of the developable area of the property as noted by ordinance. I do think there could be a case that could potentially be made. Of course, it's not necessarily just my decision. It's ultimately at Planning Commission and City Council level for setback variances based on utilization of wetland areas and as a major component of proposal. But unfortunately, I don't believe that either of these options on screen 1 or 2 of these options or requests reach the threshold for establishment of practical difficulties as required by the ordinance. I did enclose the guidelines for the review of variance for your review and consideration. With that page, I chose just to enter my thoughts, my opinions with that sheet, just to make them as clear as possible. Practical difficulties necessary for approving a variance only exist when all 3 of the following conditions are met. Number 1, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted in the zoning ordinance. Number 2, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property not created by the landowner. And number 3, the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of the locality. Further, it's stated within ordinance as well as state statute that economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties for purpose of variance. They can be considered as part of it, but they shouldn't be the crux of the application. The application materials do rely heavily on referencing economic aspects, including the current cost of non-solar development or traditional development on a property, claimed issues with the depth of the current city utilities and viability for connection, and the potential value of the property via Excel's community solar program, as well as the desirability of the property for solar development due to design and distance requirements for solar connection and increased capital expenses in developing such facilities further away would be potentially possible under the existing ordinance. Additionally, while it's commendable, the ordinance as written cannot factor increases in renewable energy or benefits to the environment or reductions in carbon emissions as part of our review. It's not part of our ordinance, so it's outside bounds of what we can consider. Again, I did enclose the Planning Commission variance guidelines and criteria for approval with staff's opinion. I'll go through those shortly. I did receive several contacts regarding the proposal, 2 from neighboring residents and 1 from Senator Jeff Howe's office. Senator Howe noted concerns he had received from constituents that had purportedly been precluded from installing their own private solar systems on their own residential properties due to claimed lack of grid capacity stemming from large solar field development, as well as potential for foreign ownership of solar facilities as their ownership is transferred. Although admittedly, I'm unable to substantiate either concern at this time, but I did want to convey them along. Given careful consideration of the request and the intent and aspects of the applicable ordinances as written and evaluation of the request against the requirements for variances as enclosed, I would recommend denial of all 3 variance requests as submitted. In staff's opinion, the requests are unable to meet the requirements and threshold for establishment of practical difficulties. And I'll run through those shortly here so as I can find it. I'll bring it on screen here as well. Just for reference, you can see, and the applicants did an excellent job at this. For that, they deserve credit. The overlying setbacks that they'd be working with, the area in question, the property outlined and shaded in blue, the red circle, that being the 3/4 mile setback requirement from another solar project, the orange being a 1,000-foot setback from public road, and the yellow, and what they're saying is dark blue, 500-foot setback from non-participating residential property. So those are the 3 overlaying major setback aspects that they're seeking to deviate from. The city engineer Dave Blommel did prepare a memorandum for your consideration as well, and Dave's in attendance tonight at my request. So here we have the Planning Commission variance guidelines and the criteria for approval as far as practical difficulties. I basically went line by line and stated my opinion after having opportunity for review and input on this. As far as practical difficulties for criteria for approval, practical difficulties as used in connection with the granting of a variance means that, number 1, the property owner proposed to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted by the ordinance. I do not believe that the current proposal is to be reasonable given the ordinance and configuration of the property. Both proposed designs utilize major swaths of developable area located centrally within the property and not utilizing wetland as directed per the ordinance, or locating potentially to the farther eastern side to accommodate potential development on remnant area. Number 2, the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. Staff does not believe the claimed circumstances regarding applicability of the solar ordinance to be unique to the property. Rather, the applicable ordinance affects all properties zoned agro-residential equally since its adoption in 2019. The concept that the property owner could have hosted a solar farm prior to adoption of the ordinance is flawed, as there is no guarantee that such a request would have been approved even prior to adoption of the current ordinance. And city ordinances for permissible uses are based on present conditions rather than what may have been allowed in the past. We do have plenty of grandfather properties, things that were, of course, permissible at the time they were done, but we would not allow at this time, and they can remain. That's part of the ordinance, but that doesn't mean that you get to do the same thing under the ordinance at this time. I would note, though, I do believe that there is significant natural screening. I don't disagree with that. And the existing configuration and designs of public streets do make a case for potentially viable for reductions in setbacks for an alternative design option. Number 3, the variance, if granted, will not alter the essential character of locality. Staff believes that variances granted for either option 1 or option 2 would alter the essential character of the locality to an untenable degree. The ordinance intent is to guide away from developable areas and into wetland and lowland areas wherever possible. and an alternative utilizing at least partial wetland areas known to exist, even if it is more expensive to construct. To me, both options as presented jeopardize the intent and effectiveness of the current solar wind electric generating facility ordinance. All but one existing solar facility are located in areas where utilities are unavailable and near-term development is not realistic, and the one other that remains is a relatively small facility, approximately 1 megawatt in size, that was placed as far north on the property as was possible, away from public right-of-way, and to allow room for future additional development if possible. Again, though, I would agree that existing tree cover in several areas of the property, as well as limited use of public streets in the area with existing limited number of businesses on them, may potentially be viable and appropriate for potential reduction in setbacks for a revised design. B, economic considerations alone do not constitute practical difficulties. Applicant cites Excel distribution line with desirability for location based on Excel development costs. Ordinance is not intended to make costs viable for solar, but rather to ensure additional solar and wind developments are not concentrated in any one area and to limit impacts to neighboring properties. While applicants have not located other potential buyers and advised of concerns with depth of available utilities, utilities have been previously determined to be in line with industry norms. Applicants advise that sale of the property for solar would raise capital for development for remainder of property, but do not cite any specific detail regarding how that would be performed. Applicants further note that adjacent vacant properties currently serviced with city utilities are likely to be developed first, and that the subject property would be ready for development at the conclusion of the interim use permit. While that's certainly possible, the subject property is currently serviced, and there's nothing precluding similar development at this time, and any one of the service properties is considered ready for development without any single one necessarily having to be developed first. There's a handful of properties in the area of varying sizes, some relatively large, that any one could be ready to go any day. Of course, we want to see that happen. I understand it's not, but I don't think that necessitates a variance. Subdivision 6, findings of fact. As far as this is for your review, letter A is the variance in harmony with the purposes and intent of the ordinance. I do not believe the request in harmony is in harmony with the purpose and intent of the ordinance. Is the variance consistent with the comprehensive plan? Yes, but with a caveat or an asterisk. While a new comprehensive plan is forthcoming in which the proposal would be considered inconsistent, the proposal is not inconsistent with the currently adopted 2005 comprehensive plan, and that's one we have to go by at the moment until we adopt a new one, which is very short time away. But I acknowledge that we're still working under the 2005 comprehensive plan at this moment. Does the proposal put property to use in a reasonable manner? No, in staff's opinion, the proposed variances and proposal would put the property to use in an unreasonable manner and would be against the intent of the existing solar and wind electric generating facility ordinance. Are there unique circumstances to the property not created by the landowner? Again, I will acknowledge yes. I do believe there are several unique circumstances with the property that are not created by the landowner. As referenced earlier, there is quite a bit of natural screening that exists, and the designs and configuration of public streets in that area and the amount of traffic on them could be reasonable, potential viable for reductions in setbacks for an alternative design, but I can't get behind that concept for either of these designs. I think that's too much. Lastly, will the variance, if granted, alter the essential character of the locality? Yes, in staff's opinion, the variances, if granted to support proposed project configurations, would alter the essential character of the locality and be against the intent of the ordinance as written. So we can go back to my staff report. I can wrap that up, but I would recommend, again, denial of the 3 variances as requested, but you can certainly open that up for for discussion amongst the planning commission and for the public hearing component, and Mr. Ardolph can move forward with conducting the presentation as he'd like to, whenever ready.
Commissioners have any questions? It is a public hearing. If anybody has any comments to make, they can come up, or if Mr. Adolph wants to come up and do his presentation.
Thank you thank you very much. My name is Tom Ardolph. I think for the record, we're supposed to Tom Ardolph, and my wife Susie Ardolph is here. We're at 2992 County Road 137 in Waite Park. And first, John, thank you very much for helping me to get to this evening here today, to be able to do this. And I'd also like to thank the committee for the opportunity to present this information to you. You know, I think this is really a chance to also share with you how we have been consistently acting, not just about this particular project, but we have consistently been acting as good stewards and citizens of Waite Park, and we believe these variances allow us to continue to act in that fashion. So John, if you could go, PowerPoint, please.
Sure, absolutely. If you just give me a moment, Tom, I
Yep,
want to make
you
sure
bet.
I'm sharing it for Eric and anyone else on the screen here. Make sure you see what we're seeing. My apologies, this is, okay, new share, that's what we want. Eric, if you're online, can you let me know, can you see that?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, I'm gonna go to the slideshow from beginning here, and we'll toggle through as, I'm gonna try and get this out of the way a little bit so everyone can see it.
Okay, I can see it down there. Good. All right, you can go to the second slide right away then, John.
Sure.
So I want to give you a quick history of the land that we're talking about in aggregate. A lot of you may know it as Tony Philips's farm family. It's been in the family for decades. And Gary Zabinski has been renting the land from Tony and Rita, farming it, and we continue to rent it to Gary for farming it. In the past, so just the history thing, we have actually considered solar 2 times. One time, right before the ordinance, literally in 2018, we had worked with a company for just a small one at that time because of the state ordinances on how large a field could be, and that was going to be just 10 acres. But at that time, I was told that an ordinance was going into effect. If anything, we could apply for a variance after that if what we wanted to do and where we were going to put it. But after the ordinance went into effect, we really wasn't anything to be entertained. We also actually did have a larger organization come and talk with Sam, our realtor, not too long ago, and when he actually heard that it was in Waite Park, he declined to start the process that likely we're going through here today. We did also have a car auto transport business that came to us and wanted to purchase land right there. And I did call the city office, and I was told that actually wouldn't even be entertained. So we've really been just unable to find any real use other than renting it out at a very low cost to be able to, where the agricultural farm, where that continues to be done. Now, 2 years ago, to the month, oddly enough, we were approached by someone, and actually we signed a purchase agreement. And this exact land that we're talking about here today, and actually all of the woods in the picture that John had up earlier, there's 80 acres of woods. We signed a purchase agreement to sell it. We thought it was getting developed, actually. Kind of happy that we, after 16 years or 15 years, that we were actually going to be able to sell some of the land. Right before a city council meeting, I think the day or two before, it was revealed to us that they wanted us to sign an interim use permit for mining to be granted, and it was right before the moratorium was going to be put on. And I tell you, it was going to be 112 acres that they were buying, and there was going to be mining, crushing, an asphalt plant, a concrete plant, a full aggregate operation. And we stopped it. You know, what ended up happening is we felt in our best interest and in our neighbor's interest, I could never walk and talk to my neighbors, one of them being a relative that's in the back of the room here tonight, to tell them there's going to be an aggregate plant in your backyard. And I speak actually also to the concerned citizens and my neighbors that are here that we were inches and seconds from having to sell the land. And it cost us $25,000 to get out of that purchase agreement because we didn't think we were being good stewards, good citizens, and more than anything else, good neighbors. John, if you could go to the next slide, you'll see literally what the interim use permit said it was going to be. And if you can kind of look closely, and it's in the packet that you have, it says, machinery will be near the area indicated on the map and could at times include portable crusher, screeners, loaders, generators, wash plants, classifier, concrete plant, and asphalt plant. So again, I speak to you, the committee as well as to my neighbors that inches and seconds from literally having 50-foot tall piles of aggregate with 100-foot tall conveyors and trucks going in and out all of the time. And it was going to, that permit had a high probability of literally getting approved. And we just didn't felt it was in the best interest of everyone to do that. Go to the next slide if you would, John. Here's the land. And this was again part of the interim use permit. You can see where there were going to be stacks of stored piles of aggregate, the plants, asphalt plant, concrete plant right there. And so again, neighbors, look and see, this is what was almost there 2 years ago. And think of all the traffic that would have also taken place as a result of that. So our solar plans instead protect the roadside for future development. All of the acreage from 137 back to the brush line that we have in front of our house, we foresee that maybe someday that is viable as development. If anything's gonna get developed, it's gonna be the roadside stuff. But the agricultural land where we're putting this solar array really, as you'll hear from me, really is the lowest option of having any sort of development right there. So John, if you'd go to the next slide, I'd like to let everybody know, I don't know if everybody is aware here, both again, my neighbors, as well as the committee, is that last month we were here in front of the city council actually. And the woods area is going to become a scientific nature area. It's an addition to the SNA that's currently there that the Department of Natural Resources has. And so they're adding on to that. And it's just SNA. It is not an addition to Quarry Park. So it isn't going to be people going through there all of the time, similar to what you would see for the people visiting the park. And so we came to the council last month and they approved that. And the benefit of that is the city gets PILT, payment in lieu of taxes. That the city, they're basically having to pay taxes on the retail value of the aggregate that's in the ground right there because there's a large granite deposit right there. So for perpetuity, we've now increased the tax basis for the city by being, I think, responsible stewards and neighbors by taking it out of a mining operation and instead making it part of a scientific nature area. So, if you go on to the next slide, John, I'd like to talk about today's request. So really, this 35 acres for the solar garden is kind of, there was 80 acres that just is going into the SNA. So this kind of rounds out what we had literally had on the purchase agreement to sell to the mining operation. And we weren't gonna do the mining, by the way. That wasn't ours. It was a neighbor that was buying it, and we were just responsible for having to sign the interim use permit application because until the council would have approved that, they weren't prepared to pay for the land. So the amount of land that we're actually doing with the solar garden plus the SNA is effectively the same amount of land that almost became a mining operation 2 years ago to the month. So now the scientific nature area is for perpetuity. The solar is an interim use permit, as you know, so it's just for a period of time. And what happens then is the tax basis is now commercial value, plus they're required to pay a production tax, which is assessed by the state of Minnesota. So there is a lot more revenue that now is going to be generated rather than the green acres tax that we pay as agricultural land. So instead of having a mining operation that this city almost had out there, because that's what was going to happen, there's gonna be no noise. So my neighbors, no noise that you would have had with regard to mining, no dust. no heavy equipment and truck traffic, no waters, chemicals, or anything like that that would be ever happening. Then literally, these solar arrays, they just drive pipes into the ground and then they can take them out. There's no significant change to the land whatsoever. They don't even need a road to get into. We have a farm easement right now that's been getting used to go across the property, and that's what they'll literally use. So to me, we're preserving the land for future use after the interim use permit expires. And this entire land is almost exclusively surrounded by 50-foot plus tall trees, as John has indicated in the information that he presented to you. So John, if you can go to the next page, we'll just kind of look at all four sides of the property. This is a panoramic shot from the northwest to the northeast, and there is one residence, Neil's house, off into the left-hand corner over there that you would see. And where I tried to get hold and spend some time with him before, it was suggested that I speak with him, and unfortunately we weren't able to get together, but I tried. And so we recognize the fact that not only do we have almost 90% of the surrounding with 50-foot plus trees, Dakota Solar will be responsible for creating the necessary visibility blocks around the array that they will be installing. So no one would even really know there's a solar field even out there. And so that's the northwest to northeast. John, if you go to the next, this is just kind of walking around. So for the members that came out with me, I was taking these pictures basically where we stood. So you saw the north, now you're looking at the east side right there, and all that is tall, maybe higher than 50-foot trees all over there. And John, if you'll go to the next slide, that'll be the southeast to the southwest corner. And that trees there actually, that is the new DNR scientific nature area. And so, and I've spoken with them, and there's no objection that was raised by them to be able to have a solar field next to the scientific nature area. So let's see, and then one more slide to get us to the fourth side, if you would, John. And that grove of trees right there is our farm site, Tony's old farm house right there that we rent out. And so really you can see and you can barely see it, maybe you can see the Belle Claire Acres water tower in the distance, and there's actually, it's not a tall tree line right now, but there's already a tree line that's maybe 30-foot trees that goes all the way to our driveway. John, if you go to the next slide. This is maybe just one of those reminder slides that Minnesota is moving to 100% clean energy by 2040. That's 17 years. That's not a lot of time. The reality is everybody, every city, every township is going to have to participate in this initiative as we move to a very clean, fossil-free energy form of energy for the state of Minnesota. So I know it may not be pleasant for some or even palatable, but this is where we're going, like it or not. All right, John, if you could go to the next slide. So John briefly touched on alternatives, and I want to share with you what we've tried to do as alternatives, because we said no, even if it meant not being able to sell that land for mining. We just couldn't do that to us and to our neighbors. But there hasn't been anything else. And this is our land, and it's something we'd like to do because we're okay with putting it literally in our front yard. I have no problem whatsoever with having a solar garden in my front yard. And so if there's anyone that's going to be impacted, it's Susie and me. When you look around though, coming down 28th Avenue off of 23, you've got the Labuda property. That's more developable. It's 100 acres right there, 100 acres with services to it right now. Right next to Labuda's property is a Samala property, and that's another 80 to 100 acres that we have right there. Helen and Bob have already platted and have what, about 35 acres, I believe? How many? About 40 acres. That has city sewer and water services there. It's platted, the sign's been up. They would love to put spades in the ground and move dirt, is my guess, if they could. They've tried platting, I believe, in 2 different ways. I mean, he can share if you want, but it's my understanding he's tried 2 different ways of generating interest in being able to build there. And as you can see, there's not been a spade of dirt turned right there. So, and so that's residential property, because I believe our land is supposed to be medium-density residential property. But even if we consider commercial property, we all know, and you do, that the Miller commercial property is going to be the first place any commercial is going to take place. And so for years and years to come, there isn't an iota of opportunity to make our land commercial property. And I recognize, as John said, that economic reasons cannot be the only reason, but can be part of the logic as you weigh our request for the variances. And I was in a meeting in this building right here where we were told we were supposed to bury the city sewer and water down the middle of County Road 137 at 39 feet. And I called local Wade Park business, Dan Molitor, up, and I said, Dan, what would it cost to just put a couple houses on that west portion where I did a wetlands delineation and left enough property to put a couple houses? And he said, I wouldn't touch it for less than $750,000 just for those two houses to be able to do that. And so I knew that that wasn't even a realistic thing. So for the foreseeable future, there's absolutely nothing. And we're losing more each year, frankly, due to taxes increasing faster than the agricultural rent that we can have. And I know it's an economic issue, but it's the reality. Interim use permits are a benefit for everyone because we get an energy resource out of this right here. And I believe Eric will be able to talk a little bit about what the benefits of that for an energy resource that's being intensely facilitated by both the state and the federal government. And as a matter of fact, the reason we're here today for 35 acres is because the state of Minnesota in the last legislative session changed their statutes that says instead of having a limit of 10 acres, they boosted it all the way to 35 acres because they said, we know we have to do this in the state of Minnesota. And so we're really just trying to participate in that fashion with the size that we have right here. So, let's increase the tax base. Let's, make this on an interim basis. Allow us, the landowner, to utilize our land that we've been paying for 17 years and plan for the future when it will be possibly realistic for other uses. And always remember, we're preserving the west side, which would be the first place that anyone would ever move a shovel full of dirt anyway, if something would ever get built and city services could be on the roadside right there. We're trying to be our best to be good citizens, stewards, neighbors of everyone right there. We stopped 2 years ago that mining operation. We pursued the SNA that provided taxes on land that has a high value with the aggregates, and now we simply ask you to use our land and generate more taxes while we're not intruding on any Wade Park citizens' lifestyle. So I'm going to address the 3 questions that John addressed. I'd like to give you the perspective that we have on the 3 questions that you have to weigh in granting us the variance. So the first question is, the property owner proposes to use the property in a reasonable manner not permitted in the zoning ordinance. So just compare what we are asking to what the city was going to grant to Bill Buckentine 2 years ago. Mining, asphalt, and a concrete plan. Fast forward 2 years. A hidden solar field. How much more reasonable can a request be? Indeed, as John had mentioned, the request is consistent with the current comprehensive plan. And so that statement as it was up there says, yes, while a new comprehensive plan is forthcoming, and we can't plan on next year's comprehensive plan, the proposal is not inconsistent with the currently adopted 2005 comprehensive plan. So I hope you concur that that evidence shows you that we satisfied that first question for a variance request. Okay, let's go on to the next slide if you would, John. The second question is the plight of the landowner is due to circumstances unique to the property, not created by the landowner. And let's face it, we aren't the ones responsible for economic development in the city of Wade Park. We are landowners and are simply providers for the development as economic development takes place. By the way, I don't know if you know something, home building is at a national low. The lowest statistics ever. Sam, I think can share that with you if you have questions on that. Lower than ever since history tracking began. And that is unique, and it's not created by Susie and me. You know, Wade Park is somewhat of an anomaly. I don't think there's going to be any argument here. Is anomaly a little bit compared to St. Cloud, Sartell, Sauk Rapids, St. Joe. Building is taking place in some of those cities. I'm not going to disagree with that. You know, but look at the south side of St. Joe when you drive in on 121 right there. Don't we all wish that we were seeing those buildings going up in Wade Park? There are more houses being built there in the last year like than a decade in Wade Park. And actually, I believe Sam has the permit statistics. As a matter of fact, could I do this? Can I ask anyone in this room or on the committee, can somebody reliably tell me that today development is in the foreseeable future that will reach our property? Anyone? That's what I thought. So the city response, they actually agree with me. It says there are several unique circumstances with the property not created by the landowner. So I hope for question 2, you concur that the evidence would indicate we satisfy this question for a variance request. John, if you go on to slide 3. So we're almost done here, as you know. The third question, the variance if granted will not alter the essential character of the locality. And so it talks about locality. It doesn't say specific zoned area or something. And so just compare what we are asking to what the city was going to grant Bill 2 years ago, mining, asphalt, and concrete. And now we want to put a passive solar array out there. So fast forward 2 years, a hidden solar field. I think we should almost call it, instead of Ardolph Acres, hidden acres or anonymous acres, because nobody would see what's there. How much more reasonable do you think that request can be? As a matter of fact, John, could you go on to the next slide? The question asked the locality. So on the other side of the trees on our north side is that small triangle of stuff that you see right there. That picture to the far right, what I did is I stood on the road that is part of the question of the variance about being next to a roadway. I stood and first I looked north and took that picture, and then I turned 180 degrees and I took the picture to the south, which is the tree line that you see right there. And I'm not picking on that business for that pile of stuff. It's zoned that way, so I have no qualms with that whatsoever, and I have no qualms with the city allowing that. But the question that I have to answer is with regard to locality. And so the locality with just a grove of trees in between, we have one picture versus what you see if you turn south from that same, standing on the same road. So I just really feel, you know, can anyone actually state that the picture to the right, the large one, does that alter the essential character of the locality? And look at what that sentence says. To an untenable degree. That's the question. And even John's report said there is significant natural screening that exists, and existing configuration designs of public streets would be potentially viable for reductions in setbacks for an alternative design. So I really, again, hope, what are your thoughts when you look at that right there? And so I hope that you see that the evidence, once again, shows that we have stated a good position to get a yes with regard to the third reason to grant us the variances. And John, if you just kind of go to the last slide, the conclusions that I have. You know, we saved the city and the neighborhood, and I hope my neighbors are glad that we did that for you. We saved the city and the neighborhood from having a mine and the traffic and the dust at our cost. We brought a consistent tax base to you. We've been trying for almost a decade to find a use, frankly, for this land. And we are proposing a very low impact, tax generating, socially and environmentally beneficial solution for an interim use. We do plan on retaining that west side for any development that may eventually happen. And I believe we meet all three requirements that are asked of us to be granted variances from our perspective. We hope from yours too. And I realize staff has to stay strictly between the lines of the ordinance. I have no qualms, and I understand the way John wrote it up and presented it that to you. but you're the planning commission and you need to have the vision in planning for the city as your committee name implies. So with all this data that I brought you, I hope that our request for the 3 variances is granted. Thank you.
Anybody else like come up and make a comment or have a question?
Just bear with me, Chair Jansky. I'm trying to go back to the original screen here. We'll go back to our participant list too. Just a point of clarification as well. Mr. Ardolph referenced the application for quarrying or mining a couple times. That deal was essentially terminated before there was ever an application made. The most I was aware is that it was a possibility and we were potentially expecting one. But when you mentioned that 2 years ago that was being considered, that stopped on their end, and the whole thing was withdrawn. I believe it was a plat at that time that needed to potentially go forward before we would ever see an application for interim use permit for quarrying. I have never seen until tonight any actual documentation as to what was actually being proposed. So that's a first for me. So I can't say that the city would have approved that or would not have approved it because we didn't see an application and thus no review or consideration was ever made for it. Just a point of clarification there.
State your name and your address.
Yeah, my name's Neil Lamfer. I live at 2862 County Road 137. My property is just to the north of this property. I'm against the variance. First of all, when I got the information, I thought that it was quite deceiving because it gives 500-foot circles for residential, 1,000-foot parameters for the public roads. And it makes it sound as if that's what the current ordinance is, when in fact, on part of the residential, it's not even close. 1,320, from what I talked to John, is what the current setbacks is for both residential and public roads. Quite frankly, option 1 is, I see as a slap in the face. I have zero buffer. I wish he put a good presentation. I'll give him credit for that. I wish he would have taken a picture from my property, from my house. There would be zero buffer from anywhere by my house, from my patio, from my backyard. Even you drive in from my yard, the first thing you see is that cornfield. There's no trees, there's nothing there. Yes, you could plant trees there, but the ordinance calls for trees to be the same height approximately as what the solar panels would be, which would be about 4 feet high. Do you realize how many years that would take before I would have any substantial buffer from this solar farm, most of this solar farm? My house, my property, my land is 40 feet from the corn, which if you look at the map for option number 1, you see where option number one goes very close to that tree grove, which is exactly where the cornfield is now. My property line is 40 feet from that. My house is less than 200 feet. That's what it would be, less than 200 feet from these solar panels with no buffer. So anywhere, like I say, I look from my house, etc., I'd be looking at solar panels. So when you call this hidden, for me, that's a joke. It's not at all hidden for me. The distance from the road, now we're talking east and west. The distance from the road, from the corner there, and I actually took a 100-foot tape measure and measured from the road along the edge of my property, right where the edge of that solar field would go in option number 1. And I measured down 300 feet. And at the end of my 300 feet, I was about 40 feet into the corn. So that would be very close to where the edge of this solar farm would go. Again, 300 feet, you're talking a setback currently of 1,320, so you're not even close. For my house, it would be an 85% deviation from the current setback, and for the case of the road, it would be approximately an 80% setback, change in the setback. So we're not talking like 10, 20, 30% or something. We're talking a major amount. Option 2 is not much better, being it still, even from my house, would be more than 50% from the current amount. It would be approximately, the best I can tell, about 400 feet from the road, which again, with the current setback 1,320, you're over 60, 66% from what the current setback is. I already talked about the trees. I mean, that would take forever. I mean, there's an argument that could be made that these solar farms, especially this large, do not belong in the city limits. There already are several other solar farms close to my property. And I think this is one of the reasons that our Senator Jeff Howell chimed in on this. It's getting hard, he said, for individuals to hook up to the grid because of the oversaturations in some areas like ours. You already talked about, John talked about quite a few times about the other variance that would be, or the other guideline that would be broken. That would be that this is supposed to be in wetlands or otherwise non-buildable to avoid agricultural and otherwise buildable land. Here's a comment that could be argued. I don't see how. The land that is option 1, I don't know so much about option 2. I've never seen it underwater or anything like that. That land is very buildable. In my opinion, the city needs to be careful of what I call the slippery slope effect. If you allow this now, there's several other large landowners that will be watching your decision on this. They're hoping that you actually allow this to go in there. Why? Because that will give them the argument and the ammunition in the future to get their projects to do what they want to do, even if it doesn't fall within the city ordinances for their projects also. What does this really boil down to? Why are they for it? Why am I against it? For them, it's very simple, money, straight out. He said he wouldn't mind, he doesn't have a problem it being in his front yard. Well, yeah, he's going to get paid for it. For me, I'm not going to benefit from it at all financially, and my property will depreciate, and as a bonus, I get to look at an ugly solar farm. If they were in my shoes and they weren't going to benefit from it in any shape, way, or form financially, and their property was to depreciate, they wouldn't be for this either. I want to close on a personal note. Just a few years ago, I came to the city and asked if I could build a garage on my right off of my current cement slab. It would have gone against one, not many, city ordinances. And even though I had the support of all my neighbors, and this garage that I wanted would have been very difficult to be seen by anyone because of the large grove of trees in the front of my property, I was turned down. So you can imagine how I'm going to feel if you accept this in any capacity. Well, this is breaking several ordinances and it'd be 10 times the eyesore of what I wanted in just my garage. Thank you.
Well, can I ask a question before you leave?
Yeah.
We're talking about screening where your property is.
Yep.
Well, how would you feel about a large berm with trees planted on top of and around the berm?
What berm?
A berming so that you don't see would be screening for the field, but you wouldn't see it when you drive in and from your house.
Anything that you're going to plant there is going to take forever. Are you talking about building up a large hill and then putting trees on
an
top of
actual
that?
earth berm with trees planted on top of it.
No, I would not be in favor of it.
Just curious about that.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that this property isn't going to stay this way forever. What they're asking us to do is take either bad or worse. I think there's other options. I don't think we have to just accept bad or worse. Like John said, that mining thing that they talked about, that wasn't accepted, and I highly doubt that it would have been accepted.
Thank you.
Anything else?
else would like to come and make a comment or ask questions or anything?
Yeah, this is Eric Gillen. I would like to, if now is a good time, to make a few points.
Okay, go ahead.
And hi, I'm Eric Gillen from Dakota Sun Capital. I've been working with John and Sam on some of these designs and whatnot. And I just wanted to address a couple of the senators' concerns and a few of the things we just heard from Neil regarding the and then thank you, John, too, for setting this up. My 5-year-old had surgery yesterday, so we're at home in recovery mode, so it was a little tough to get there tonight. But thanks again, John. And, John's been great in being very responsive to any questions and just understanding, the ordinance language and whatnot. And in regards to the senator's concerns, prior to me being on the private side of solar, I spent 8 years at the utility working with community solar gardens, residential solar, utility scale, everything, natural gas, renewable energy. And his comments regarding that these projects have caused problems for residential, people to not be able to put solar on their rooftops because of grid capacity concerns. It is possible that could happen, but it's very rare. So, essentially residents that are doing that, most residents, just by percentage wise, live closer to, populous centers where you have the substation and distribution infrastructure and whatnot. And generally that's where the capacity is on the grid. You could see in the application, just the hosting capacity map with Excel. As you get closer to where the people live, there's hosting capacity. As you get further away, that's where hosting capacity is tough to come by on the distribution side. So anyway, I just wanted to point out that I don't think that concern is valid, and we're actually willing to, as a developer, when we go through the Excel interconnection study, if it does come up to this, project being maxing out that entire distribution line, which is one of their measurements they do, we would be willing to downsize the project to leave room for, just throwing out a number, 40 new applicants that would be interested in putting solar up over the next, the project life. And, right now the study came back and said that the substation and feeder that this line is on right now has room for 76 megawatts and 22 megawatts respectively. And to put that in perspective, this project we're looking at is 5 megawatts. So again, I don't think it is a concern. And if it does become a concern, we're willing to kind of reserve an allocation so that we're, not hindering people out of that opportunity. And the other thing mentioned by the senator was potential for foreign ownership. And without really having the context of that concern, it's a little difficult to, say how we could address it. And we are willing to address it if we understand it a little better. I'm not sure if he's just, nervous about investors from, countries that are kind of frowned upon in doing business, that might be on the sanctions list or whatnot, because I can assure you that's not going to happen. The only reason I'm hesitant is that a lot of the US-based developers, it's a very capital-intensive business. They're receiving funds from, infrastructure funds, private equity funds that may or may not come from foreign ownership. And like I said, we're willing to work with whatever requirements, that issue, stems from. I just want to point out that, it's similar to the real estate world where, you might have an apartment owner, they might be US based. Maybe some of their investors are foreign, maybe not. So again, we're willing to, address that concern and work with it, once we understand it better, but again, I don't feel that, it's a valid concern that applies to this, project. And, I don't want to beat a dead horse. Tom covered, why he and we thought that we hit the 3-prong, test that was referenced. And I understand that economic, reasons aren't a sole reason to approve this. They can be considered. And again, we just want to highlight kind of how this works. So the community solar program means that it's going straight to Excel's grid. But what their program allows us to do is to sell, they're basically virtual bill credits. So it basically allows us to sell those to local commercial businesses and residents. And what happens is they sell those at like a 10% discount-ish, 10 to 20, kind of depends on the market. So you're talking $3.5 to $4 million of bill credit savings for local businesses and residents. And I know we mentioned this too before. The investor group we've been working with, they actually wanted to file this, if it were to be approved, as a low income community solar garden. So they would apply for the incentive, so that at least 50% of it would go to some sort of public housing authority, that they can then disperse those bill credits to their members, and usually that's at 20% bill credits. So again, that's not a guarantee. That's just the intent of what they want to do and apply for that incentive. And Tom mentioned the property tax thing. Not exactly sure the final value of this. Kind of depends on where we end up here, but you're talking about another $700,000 to $1 million at least over the project year's life, and property taxes that could benefit the community. And we're also willing to hold out an extra $100,000, for whatever purpose the city would like to do with it, and make that as part of the requirement for them when they're factoring in the build costs. And then just a few comments on hearing Neil's concerns. That's one thing I was thinking of too. There might be some other options too, if the site, seeing it is the issue. I was also thinking of, maybe a berm's possible, with stuff planted on top of it. But to clarify, I agree, the whole thing is not screened. The majority of it is, and as Neil mentioned, there's part of it that's not screened for him. But in addition to this screening, the project itself has to have a screen built around it, per the city ordinance. So that's another thing we could look at is maybe possibly making that a little higher on top of building out something from Neil's view. Or as you see these two options, we kind of propose these thinking, hey, that this is going to impact the least amount of people. It's possible to, maybe merge those two together and push it farther to the east. And I know John mentioned that in his application, to where it's further away from Neil's property. So again, there's just some other options I think we could consider there. But yeah, those are really the only points I wanted to make. Again, I think Tom kind of covered the rest of the points I was going to make. So thank you again for letting me chime in here.
Could I ask a question of Mr. Gillen?
Yep.
Yeah, you may.
If it were to make it more palatable, could the configuration of the solar field be widened? In other words, go farther north and south, wider, and come less distance to the west? In other words, it would come closer to Tom Ardolph's house, but would come more distant from Neil's house. Could that be a possibility?
Yep, it sure would.
Okay. Thank you.
You know, Mr. Trisco is here, and I'd like to ask him a couple questions. Would you mind?
Bob, could you come up to the podium, please?
Well, come on up here. I just wanted to ask you a couple of simple questions.
We won't make you swear in the Bible or anything.
You're, Mr. Trisco, you're not required to. It's at your discretion. If you want to entertain Mr. Schulz's request, it's up to you. It's a public hearing, but it's not a requirement that anybody speak.
Well, the only reason I want to ask questions is because you have, your property is contiguous to this one. And I know you've come to the city council and the planning commission several times to talk about development over there, and I would like to know, what is your feeling about this potential development that Mr. Ardoff is talking about? I mean, you've got a direct interest in this as well, and so I would just like to hear from you.
I see a side of the story because we have busted our tail for 2 years trying to get development.
Mr. Trisco, I'm sorry, but if you do choose to speak, yeah, we just want you to go on the record and be
I'm
at the
sorry I
mic
put
if
you
you
on
do
the
choose to
spot,
speak.
but I really do have a question, so.
I see Ardoff's side of the story because we've been busting our tail for 2 years, calling everybody possible to try to get development to happen. And I don't want low-income housing or what do they call Project 8 or something like that. I don't want to bring
Section
that
8.
kind of stuff to Wake Park because that's not my vision in view of what we want to do along the Quarry Park with condos and nice apartments and a science museum. We're even paying double the value of Verizon Roofing, but no developer wants to look at our land for development, looking at that roofing company there, and we're forced to buy it because he says, I'm going to build if you don't pay me, $1.8 million for it. And we're doing it, and I'll probably have to throw it into a foundation so that capital gains or whatever taxes come rolls into it to become a benefit to a museum that could benefit the park and that whole area for Wade Park. So and Knobloch, I've worked with the one that built all of 2nd Avenue, and Mark just says, no, you can't buy it. That's way too much money for it. Talk to the city. Get help from them. Work with the park department. I said, I don't have time. We got to get this done within a month. We're not going to delay it. We're just going to have to bite the bullet to make sense out of all this project. But it's tough. I was working with Ardoffs with Lenars. I thought if Lenars comes in, they're not going to want 40 acres. They're going to want 200, 300 acres to do a nice development for housing. And then I would take care of Ardoffs by sweeping it all into one project, and the land across the road from us would be perfect for Lenars or some big housing firms that's national that really do a good job that's far above what exists in our area, and they provide housing concepts to the buyers with a good, well thought out color theme and design themes, and they offer loans to the buyers, and they allow them to pick appliances all within a designer code, and they do fantastic work. I've been through many of their houses, and I think it would be a big asset to our community to get something really nice that could sweep our land right into Ardoff's and the land across from us to make that a really nice community thing. But we've been struggling and struggling and struggling, and Tom is going through the same thing we are. We're trying to benefit him, and I don't feel wrong about what he's doing, because sometimes I say, if you do that, I'll sweep it in my land because I can't get it to fall either. But we're still calling Lenars and other big companies like that, and we're hammering it from different realtors, different developers, and anyone. They're only an hour away from us. They're in Delano, they're in Rockford, and I said, you can buy this land for 1/3 the price tag of the land you're paying in Rockford and those areas closer to the cities to make it really affordable housing with your concept in our area. And you need that big acreage, come on in, make a deal with Ardoffs and us and Labuda's land across the road, and we'll have it all done. And there's even a little farm there on that corner from Labuda's that imitates Delano that has a little farm on their project too. I mean, if I could only get those people in to see what we've got for the benefit of Waite Park, and Tom would probably be approved of it too, if we knew someone like that could be swept into this whole vision of ours. But it's just really tough. And we still have visions of a art colony, maybe going in that plastic company, and maybe a fitness center to fit into where the piles of stuff are from Molitor's project and the O'Hara that owns the Summit stuff, to kind of re-scoot that out of there as we get the development and to make that something nice, and to get the storage, the heated storage units behind there on the last 2 blocks of land that Molitor is going to give us to service storage for all the boats and campers and toys people have that can't fit into the condo project in the Quarry Park. So we had this big theme like we talked to you about 2 years ago, and my wife and I have worked our asses off to try to make things happen with Kelly Durand out of Minneapolis, who does really nice project, and he was going to come up and help fulfill our vision, and now he's full of cancer. So he said, I don't think I can help you. So we also went to a Dora for him, and we worked with the people that built the Viking Stadium, and we went to Mrs. Carlson when she was alive to help get leads to all these different developers to help give Waite Park something better and best to the community over and above what Sartell has or anybody else in the community would have. And now I've got Mark Knobloch and his son kind of interested in stuff, and I'm trying to get their involvement to kind of make this thing happen once and for all. But we've been beating our heads. We've been waking up doing nice. We work weekends every day with ideas and concept. And my wife and I are on the phone constantly to out-of-state developers that do big projects, because this takes deep pockets. And most builders in our areas work from the bottom line up to make that project work. I'm looking for a guy who works from the top down that's got millions of dollars in their pocket who just wants this vision to happen. Not for Waite Park, but for the Tri-County and people, retired farmers. And I want to pull from Minneapolis, and I want to pull for snowbirds that want to punch a key from the condos and go south. So it's a vision we have that I believe will really work if we do it upright. And our struggle is such that we can't make it go, then we donate it to a church for maybe a place for them to escape for retreats. I mean, there's all kinds of places we can dump it, which we don't want to do.
The bottom line is, do you support their request?
My wife and I kind of feel on their side, only because we know how hard it is to move property. They have to have a $1 million lift station put on their property to lift the sewer to get it on our land, to get it up to the city. So they got that cost right away up front without infrastructure.
That's
I
what
wouldn't
was
want to be,
asking. Thank
it
you.
makes sense for me to buy their land and develop it all the way through, but I can't do it without the help of Lennars or some other big developer. And I'm reaching out trying to get that to happen, because I'd rather have that happen for the benefit of Waite Park, to have all the housing and all that stuff going out there. What better area do we have than where we're in right now that has I-94, 23, 75? You got all the roads to get in and out of there. You don't have the restriction of the river where you can't develop on the east side of St. Cloud because you got a barrier there. You got everything flowing perfect for you, better now because of the population, which is centered a little outside St. Cloud, going straight west into our property there. Because developers have a gold mine, I think, for people buying into that land and doing what we want done, because they can get to 94 to get to the cities. They can go to the amphitheater. We want to bring in restaurants like Crackle Barrel, and we have already people that agreed to build a resort-like hotel in there that could feed into the park with weddings and carriage rides and rent bikes and really make something that's visionary. But my wife and I are visionary, but what a trip we went on to. And we're not developers, and it isn't for the money we can make at all, because we want to let a legacy for the Triscos for the benefit of Waite Park and that park. That park is such a fabulous park from within. Why not develop everything around it and center it around the amphitheater and give it something that becomes a destination for Minnesota and people coming through there? And I think it can
We
happen.
appreciate that, but I just wanted to find out if you were gonna support Ardolph's or not.
I think I'm on a sign kind of right now, because I know what we have been up against 2 years. I would like to say tomorrow that I got Lennar's on board. We're coming in and buying your land and moving a different direction. But it's been a tug of war, no different for him than it's been for us. And we keep in good contact. I mean, we're good friends. And I wish him the best, and I'm sure he wishes us the best. He doesn't want to do anything that's going to obstruct our vision. And he shut down that mine, and I told him, our vision is completely gone if you don't get that mine shut down, because there's no way we can have grinding of rock and the noise and then have some nice upscale condos or apartments along the park in there.
Well, we appreciate that, but we need to get on with other things.
Oh, okay.
But I appreciate
I didn't
it.
want
Thank
to
you.
talk, because this is
Well,
my
I'd like-
heart and soul is still in this project, and
If I
I
could
don't know
ask-
which way you want to go
Bob.
with him. I see both sides of the story.
Yeah.
Bob,
That's-
if I
I
could
know.
ask it in a different way, if this project were to be built, would it have an impact on your vision for your property?
This project,
Yeah,
would you buy a condo back in there? I'm hoping to overlook the park and the quarries, and it's so natural back there. I'm hoping what he does is keeping the theme natural, because what I want to do back there is nothing other than to try to retain a green look. I'm working with an architect out of Minneapolis, and he's into green energy and all the latest stuff for green, keeping everything natural as we can get in the theme of the park that's out there.
so if you
I-
built, if you built your houses and your hotel resort complex,
I don't
would
think it's
those,
gonna
would
be in
those folks be
conflict.
able to see it?
I don't know if that would interfere with what we're doing. I'd like to say it's not. I hope it's not. But my vision is to see housing sweep all the way through, but he's got a harder time than I have trying to get it in there, and I refuse to sell it to low-income housing to make it work. You know, I don't want to go downhill, I want to go uphill with that vision from the park. And to me, that park you have there is like Mount Rushmore, and that area is to South Dakota. We have something even as good as that with the natural look of the quarry parks and the services it provides to our community. So
Okay, well, thank you, Bob.
I don't know, it's a hard decision. I'm still trying to get a buyer on his property.
Okay.
My name is Sam Johnson. Yeah, I'm the realtor that's been involved out in this area now for quite a while. Bob, we go back 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I think I worked with you guys. So I quickly had put some stuff together, and then I just had a couple questions for you guys. In the last 3 years, there have been 5 newly constructed houses built and sold in Waite Park that were listed on the MLS. You might have more on permits from arm's length transactions of folks that know each other, but there's been 5 homes in the last 3 years that have sold. All of them were along that Highway 15 development back in there that previously had the infrastructure there. They were shovel-ready lots that they were built on. Sartell in the same time period has had 51 newly built homes sold. And again, this is all just on the MLS. There might be some that maybe, missed the MLS or whatever, but it's gonna be pretty close. St. Cloud has had 150 of those, many of those largely along the Sartell border, and then out east of the airport, as you know, the city limits there stretch pretty far. St. Joe has had 6 total, that's by the college. Again, I might have missed a few of these, but in general, Sauk Rapids has had 31. The entire region as a whole in the last 3 calendar years has had 237 houses built and sold onto the MLS. when we talk about these big projects and what it's actually gonna take for a large developer to come in here and to make something happen, they need a lot of rooftops to justify it. In the region, in the last 3 years, we've sold 237 new homes, you know, call it 250. If you're a developer that wants to come in here with a big project and you're gonna take down hundreds of acres and you're gonna look at it and go, you're telling me I'm gonna sell 75 houses a year? It's not gonna happen. And if it were to happen, I wanna refer back to Mr. Blommel's, report on the sewer and the water in that area. So it was noted that there's a 20-inch DIP drop pipe, right, that feeds into the 38-foot deep sewer.
The sanitary sewer serving the Ardolph property is at 20 feet deep. Correct?
So there's, the bottom of invert's 38 feet, but there's a cast iron pipe that we can tie into it, 30,
Yes,
that's 8 inches in size?
8 inches in size.
How many homes could 8-inch sewer pipe support?
Roughly 350.
350 houses right there? Okay, and then what about the water in that area? Is the water insert in place can handle 350 too?
Build there, it'll take, yes.
Okay, so we've got the sewer and water there potentially to handle a lot of those houses. Okay, so that's good to know because we were previously under the assumption that that we were gonna have to go right down the center of the road to extend that at 39 feet. So that is a good thing that we know now. That being said, in the immediate region as well, there's 251 shovel-ready sites available for sale at the current moment. If any one of you were to come tell me, hey, I wanna build a house in the St. Cloud region, I could pull up MLS, there's 251 houses ready to go. With sewer and water stubbed out, is all we gotta do is just file a permit and start building. That's roughly 3 years of inventory. So after all the current shovel-ready inventory has been digested by developers, people will start considering newly developed land. The low-hanging fruit's going to be Labuda's. It's gonna be Bob's. They've got 69 lots. If we extrapolate that out to the 100 acres out at Labuda's or wherever, right, we're talking another 300 houses. In the last 10 years, there's been 15 lots sold in the city of Waite Park on the MLS. Again, this is all just on MLS. That's all I can base it on. Most transactions happen within there. That's 1.5 lots sold per year. And in order to sell 300 homes, it would take about 200 years to get to where it makes sense. I mean, obviously that's just straight line math. At some point there might be a big splash. But as what I'm saying is the screening is in place. It's a conditional use permit. I think it just does not pass the tummy test to me that in any way, shape, or form this affects the locality of the region. To me, it is the city is trying to protect its limited projectile of development, obviously. We understand that. But there is so much time to where that piece would ever get touched logically by any residential development. And then commercial development, we know that there's stuff serviced by rail, by highway, by interstate, that's shovel-ready, ready to go. I just can't see anything that is gonna change the situation of this. So not to mention, we're still leaving, what would it be, 45 acres of developable land here? You got 35 acres of solar shoved back into the corner of a field where there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of acres of developable land in the immediate region that needs to be filled before you get there. So that's kind of all I need to say from the real estate perspective. You know, you're making good use. Everyone else has made their points, but from a real estate perspective, you're not going to get there. It's not going to be developed anytime soon. Could be decades.
Any other comments?
I'm Susie Ardolph. I live at 2992 County Road 137, Tom's Way. We've been trying to sell this land for the last 16 years. Bob, we talked to Bob. You see Labuda's big sign, you know, they've been trying for the last 4 or 5 years. People do not want to buy the land, you know, and you say, and then Neil says, well, do something else with it. What do you do with it? We have a real water issue out there too. There's not a lot of water to have a development, you know, water and sewer. And I was talking to my brother about it, and he said, well, we're gonna do this big study and blah, 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 blah. And that's coming, but what do you do in the interim? Do you just keep sitting on this land and sitting on this land? and not do anything with it, that's not being very good stewards of the land either. I know Gary Zabinski farms it, but this year, if you see the corn in front of our house, you just, you know, he has to, I don't even know if he can feed it to his cows even because the corn is so bad. And the deer get anything that's, you know, worth taking off the cob. So we just, you know, we really would like to do something with it. You know, along with the SNA, I think solar is pretty good, you know, doing environmental stuff instead of just sitting on it and waiting for Bob's buyer to come along.
I'm Bob again, Driscoll. And if there's anything to help with delaying some of that infrastructure tax money or stuff, just to get a spark going, I think if we can get building going, that area will be on fire like St. Joe. It's just we have to get something going, and Waite Park needs housing, and people will buy houses. There's a market for people wanting to buy houses. And there's ways developers can lower the interest rates by how they cover themselves through the sale of the project and stuff. It's just the infrastructure is horrendous when they add that to Whackensack, is it called that? And then plus the city water, city sewers. I even have one guy who will drop the city water, city sewer and stay invested in the project for a section of it so we can get some houses going. But we just battle. The developers pencil everything out and they said, we're going to be in a house that's too expensive, that puts it out of the price range of the people that live here. So somehow we need some help to get this spark going. I think once we start hammering on that land, whether it's twin homes and single homes and patio homes, I think the rest will be history for Waite Park. It'll just grow and we'll keep growing on just like St. Joe. It's unfortunate we don't have that same fire going in Waite Park. And you've got better systems right here working with the road system than St. Joe has. I just don't know how we can sit together. We have developers, maybe we can meet to delay some of the tax structure so you still get it, but somehow to help that spark. I don't know where to go. I don't know the rules and regulations and all that stuff. All I have is a vision.
Bob, we thank you for your passion, but we're the planning commission. We have to deal with the zoning, not any other cost to that. So, you know, unfortunately right now we have to get back to the deal on hand and
somehow there's got to be variances to things like this just to get something going. I don't know where to go. I know you're locked, but somehow, is there any way some variance or exception to the rule can be made to make this spark happen?
when it comes to finances or that'd be the council, it wouldn't be the planning commission. And that's something you'd have to take with city staff or something on the side.
Would we set up a meeting like, I know Knobloch's son is interested in helping us out, and I know Mark himself, I think supports our idea. He likes what we're doing. And we always have thanked him for what he did for Second Avenue. And he made it happen, and he sees the same dream in us for that. And he's got his son working on it with another potential partner. But again, they need to visit with the planning commission, you people, to see how we can make this happen, because I'm out of ideas. I'm only a visionary.
Well, we really have to move on at this point, Bob, and I have to ask Dave a question.
Okay.
I was reading your report on August 30th, and I know what you've been saying about the pipe. Do we actually have the water that we need to push through the pipes to support a development?
We do.
Even though we're in a watering ban, we can't use water?
So the watering ban is kind of a separate issue. But yes, we currently have the water supply. The watering ban is as much based on a DNR regulation as it is actual physical limitations.
It was just my question, if we
And
had
it's a
the
fair
water
question.
to do that.
Yeah, we do have the water to do it. This is in the area that is intended to be supplied, and the capacity is there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I got a question for you too. Bob was talking about that he'd have to have a lift station for a sewer. That sewer is so deep, there'd be no lift station.
There should be no lift station for any of the parcels we've discussed tonight. They've all been, the lift station's already been installed.
Okay.
My name is Peter Tyson. I live at 115 35th Avenue North in St. Cloud. I've been in business in White Park for the last 40 years. And I haven't heard anybody address how long is this solar farm going to be up and running?
5 years.
35 years.
85?
35.
30. I'm at the same time, this development is up and we have through its cycle before any of that land is even developed. That we could sunset the variance and reclaim that land for use as development by the time that it actually be needed. So I think you're getting putting the cart before the horse before you're trying to save something that you're not hurting the land by anything by putting the solar farm on it. You can always remove the solar farm, you know, at a point where it has used up. And we don't know how long solar farms actually are maintained their usefulness, and I don't know that much about them, and I haven't heard, but from any of the developers of how long they'd want to have that developed, or if they'd want to renew it at that point, and at the point of the end of this round, that just close the variance and reclaim the land as building base. So that was my concern.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any comments, or if you can come up to the podium?
I think Neil Lamper, again, I think Driscoll made a few good points about if that ball ever got rolling out there and there was actually land that had the infrastructure into it, those lots would sell. Right now, it's not all built up. It's not ready for people to buy those lots, et cetera. The other thing is that, and I talked to John about this, I said, 10, 20, 30 years from now, what do you want? Do you want to drive out there and say, wow, they really did it right. They put some nice houses, whatever. Do you want to go out there and say, wow, you got a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of everything. It just is a cluster of a little bit of everything. But I think that there's so much potential out there for something good being done. As far as the solar, you put solar out there, that's going to put the kibosh on anybody that's going to come out there and say, oh, yeah, let's put this, let's develop some nice houses. When you got that they're going to look at, they're going to say, no thanks, not interested.
Anybody else want to make a comment, or?
Make a motion, we close the public hearing?
Second that.
Got a motion and a second to close public hearing. All in favor, signal with saying aye.
Aye.
Public hearing closed at 8:22.
Turn off. Mr. Chair? On comments?
Yeah, do you got any comments, or? Go ahead, Bob.
Okay, I read through this quite thoroughly Sunday, and I had the opportunity to go and physically walk the area with Tom Martolf and see exactly what is out there. And the end result is some of the reasons that I feel the variance application has some merit. I do not agree with this particular ordinance, as I voted against it when it came to this panel. It was ultimately passed by the city council. Number one, the 500-foot distance from a residence. The north side is screened by a densely populated tree line already, nearly up to Neil's house. The east and south side are entirely wooded, and the east side and some of the south side being DNR scientific and natural area, which even average people can't go on. It's going to be strictly for studying and so on and so forth. So There's gonna be nobody from that side seeing it. The south side toward the west end will be Tom Ardolph's house, and obviously he'll be looking at it. That's his issue. The remaining area along the north and west side will be planted with trees, and will be screened adequately that this will not be seen. It can't be seen now from the east, south, and north side. The resident in the west end of the area in question, the residence on the west end is owned by the Ardolphs and is rented out. The next issue, the 1,000 feet distance from public roadways. If it is entirely screened from view, what really is the difference if it's 200 feet off the road or 1,000 feet off the road? So that variance, I mean, a variance for that purpose, I see no issue with. But because it's entirely screened, I don't think that's an issue. The argument that it should be preserved for development. There is still a reasonably wide band of property on the west end that could be developed, even with the solar panel, solar farm there. And the fact that this is an interim use and not a conditional use. An interim use indicates that at the time that the panel would be of no use anymore, that it will be stopped, and if at such time there's a demand for housing, I'm sure they will do it. With an anticipated life of 35 years, it certainly has the potential for being developed later. The idea that solar fields should be limited to wetlands and so on, if we have a minimum size for these solar gardens, to find an area that has wetland, I mean, the companies won't put them on cattails, they can't. And to find an area of wetland, I think that's a kind of a ludicrous argument. I think they need an area they can work with, and this is as good as it's going to get. To set it back to 1,000 feet so the land in front of it can be developed, I presume that's the reasoning behind the 1,000-foot setback. Then you're building houses up to the solar garden, which is what we're at this point trying to avoid. So I don't understand that argument very clearly. Current policies, federal and state, want all electric use green energy by 2040. I don't think any of us realize how much more demand and how much more need we're going to have for this type of thing. This is what's wanted for the green energy, and so the need is there. And I think it's the whole idea of, I don't want it in my backyard. Well, nobody does, I guess. But we all want more electricity. We're all using more electricity. We're all going to use a lot more electricity by 2040. And we're all going to have to bite the bullet a little bit here and accept the fact that these solar gardens are going to become a necessity. And so I think we all have to take responsibility for that somewhat, because we all want the electricity. And the last thing I struggle with a little bit is the city's intent to dictate how someone uses their land. I still struggle with that a little bit. I know we develop a comprehensive plan and we say, from the city's perspective, this is what we'd like here, and this here, and this here, but to come to the point of saying this is not a good enough use of that land, I don't think it's the city's job to determine that. If it was a bad use, like a quarrying thing or something that would be harmful to everybody, I understand that. But this is a very acceptable use, and I don't think that it should be dictated to the Ardolphs that they can't use it for this purpose because we think it should be used for a different purpose. Anyway, I guess those are the points I want to make, and I think the variance for these variance requests do have some merit for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. I do see the need for solar on that, but setbacks from neighbors and stuff like that, screening is a big thing. And old tree lines don't last forever, but, so I can see some variance in footage, but is 500 feet or 1,000 from the road? That's, you know, instead of 35 acres of solar, can they cut that back, make it a smaller footprint? That's all stuff that could maybe happen, but
I'm thinking.
Hurry up.
what's your feelings, Chris?
Well, I think, for me, as we talk about this, the issue gets to be, we're talking a guess with the comprehensive plan. It's a suggestion of what we would like to do, and we guess this is the direction it's going to go. So we did that in 2005. We worked really hard on that. Well, it doesn't work today. You know, that's only 18 years ago. It doesn't work today. So we're going to say in this comprehensive plan that this is what we're going to do out there, when in fact, it's only a recommendation. The other concern is, I think the city has some thought that they spent a lot of money to put this out, the sewer and water out there, because at one point in time, Ardolph thought they could develop that into housing. Well, obviously, that's also proven it can't happen. And there's also some thought that this is the last really viable place to do residential housing in the Waite Park area. There's lots of other land out there right now that's as easily converted to developments that we're talking about doing. So I have a real problem with telling them that, no, we can't do this. And it just troubles me. And so I have to really get this into my mind, but I know some of the city thinking on it, and I don't think it's valid at this point. And especially when we're guessing on what that land should be, rather than knowing that's what's happening out there. So do we want to have a granite operation out there? I don't think so. Is this better than that? Yeah, I think so. And I understand the concern of the neighbor. If this were to go through, there has to be some significant screening that they agree with and have to approve of as part of this whole thing. But, you know, I have a tough time with this, so I'm having a difficult time making a decision on voting for these motions. So, but I'm going to make the motion at this point in time, and the council and the commission can vote it up and down or have some more discussion on it. But I'm going to remove to the recommend of the city council to approve the variance request for city ordinance section 52.56 and subdivision 4A2 to reduce 500 setback. As a matter of fact, as I look at this, I'm going to move to approve it. So that would be my motion at this point in time.
Move all three variances, to approve all
So
three.
we can only do one at a time.
Reduce the 500 foot back to what? Or just,
That would be the first one. The variance from city council, from city ordinance section 52.56 to reduce the 500-foot setback to 100 feet.
Just for clarification, the 100-foot setback variance was based on option one, kind of my estimated distance. That's why I put, because this is very high level, that's why I put estimated distances. They didn't exactly specific say, you know, a very specific foot distance like you would for a more traditional variance where you're looking for a shed or something. So that was based on option one that was presented.
So your suggestion is?
I'm just saying that when you reference the,
I'm reading it right here.
when you're referencing that to reduce the setback, that was based for option one. Option two obviously works with that just as well.
What's the setback on option two?
That's probably a little bit more than option one, because when they present two options, the variances are in play. All three variances are required for either option, but to a different degree. I would just reference, either option.
I will reference the variance to option two then. That gives me a little more palatable to our neighbor over here, but not still what he wants. So now we're open for discussion if there's a second. Yeah, now we're open for discussion if they want it.
Yeah, so I have a few things. I mean, 35 years is a long time. When the city expanded the sewer and water, and I live on County Road 137, out our way, nobody saw 2008 with the Great Recession happening and all of a sudden the real estate market crashing. A lot of people thought that the St. Cloud area was going to continue to grow at an exponential rate. In the next 35 years, I'd like to think that our area is attractive enough and close enough to the Twin Cities that we have a lot of amenities, and with Quarry Park and the Ledge, I think I would agree with Bob's vision that things could change. I guess I'd like to, if this project was going to be viable, maybe if it was going to be smaller than where it is now in option one or two, and also could we move it farther south? I mean, why not keep the farmland and preserve the farmland as is and keep collecting that rent and have the solar array be on land that is not already being farmed right now? And if that means taking out some trees, sell the trees. And so that's where I'm at. I would defer to Neil on his. Nobody wants it in their backyard when they have to view it. If this was 100 feet from my house, I would not be a happy camper. I appreciate Neil's comments. I think this could have impact on Bob's vision if we go forward with this. And again, 35 years is a long time. Waite Park is going to be a significantly different city by the time this project is over.
Tom, what is the acreage difference of solar panels from option A to option B? Is it
Can you come to the
significant?
microphone?
Eric looks like he's about to chime in. Or it looked like you went off mute,
Or can you come to the microphone, please?
Yep, he did unmute.
I believe they are about the same.
Oh, okay.
They're very close to the same.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't hear the background talk. So is the question, what was the difference in acres between the two?
Correct.
Yeah, those are taking up roughly the same amount of acres. I think it's within like 10% or so. They just have a little, different designs where one is kind of a perfect rectangle, and then the other one is a little choppy there on the bottom around those trees.
So Eric, isn't it an economic project if it was a smaller amount of acres and if it was for shorter than 35 years?
The question is the project economic?
Yes.
I do think that you could do a smaller project than what we have listed here. It's kind of a chicken and egg type of thing with getting the interconnection study back from Excel. And obviously, the bigger it is, the more you can handle on upgrade costs. Financially, I do think that you could afford the interconnection cost with a smaller footprint, but I would defer to Mr. and Mrs. Ardoff you know, basically it's their land. I don't want to commit or decommit acres there, so I think I would defer that piece to them.
Okay, now I'm gonna withdraw my motion. Do you agree? Okay, now you can make a new motion. I just want to get things started.
I think, you know, with all due respect, I think we should, if we're going to change configuration and so on and so forth, that's a whole different ballgame. Then I think we better table it. I don't,
That we should come up with guidelines for as setbacks and leave them fitted into that criteria. You know,
Well, I would say at this point in time, I would make a motion to table. We need more information, opportunity to talk about it a little further, but
table it for 30 days and.
If you're looking at a potential modification to a layout, I would agree, because we're not necessarily withdrawing or starting over, but we would want to probably renotice people because there may be interest. If the layout changes, we would probably send it out to folks again as a notice that it's just the meeting's being continued, if at all. I mean, if you wish to give guidance to the applicants as to, what kind of revisions you'd like to see them come back with, I would suggest doing so.
It's option 2. Do we know how far that is from Neil's property?
I don't have a specific distance.
well, I think we ought to table it.
It may be referenced in the report, but I don't have it in front of me in their application packet.
I don't think we have that specific footage referenced in the packet, but we can measure.
Neil, I'm sorry, if you want to come up to speak, just so everyone can hear you. We've got folks online still. Thank you.
I'm not sure if you heard, I think I figured it was about 550, which is, for me too close, but I understand I think if you were to change it, there are two things that I would want to see done. Obviously further to the south, and if you were to make it smaller, then take out the north side of that number 2. In other words, the top part of it, the north part of it, and make that thinner, and or go further to the, what would it be? The east, more towards the back of the property. If this thing ever did get to a point where it would be at all palatable for me, you'd have to do like you were talking about, put a big berm and not just some itty bitty trees on there. I mean, I don't want to be staring right at a solar field. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, I understand that there's times that change, and I understand the need for this and so on and so forth. But you have to be reasonable about it.
As far as the screening aspects, if this ever got to a point where, right now it's just, you're looking at variances to make it, can they get a variance to even pursue an application? Should that happen, at that point, then when they would apply for the interim use permit, that's when the screening and those sorts of things become a part of the review and discussion. Not at this point necessarily, but it's probably good for them to know. But this isn't the arena where we
Sure.
figure that aspect out specifically.
Okay.
But I've made a motion to table this discussion till we have an opportunity to work this out more clearly. We have more definitive information in front of us.
I would just, I would request, if you have any specific direction for the applicants to reconfigure, so I'm not speaking on your behalf. I know I've, given them my 2 cents as far as I'm trying.
I'd like to see as much buffer as we can between the neighboring properties and maybe a little bit smaller footprint to help do the buffering.
It just, from this configuration, it looks to me like if you took some of the north side and put it on, excuse me, took some off the west end, put it on the north side, for instance, you could probably get the same, similar acreage. And quite frankly, right now, it's 550 feet from Neil's house.
Are you thinking,
If it's 500 feet, it meets that guideline.
Yeah, if that indeed is 550 feet from Neil's house, they don't have to do anything more than plant trees and be within the guidelines. That's all I'm saying.
1,000 from the road, they're closer to that, so that'd be something they'd have to.
Yeah, the 1,000 from the road, but I think that's more palatable than 500 from Neil's house.
The other variance they were asking for is the 3/4 of a mile from other sites.
and there's really no way around that at the property at all, with save for maybe the very northeastern portion here, but that wouldn't be a scale of, I think, that they would probably look at unless it were, you know, a disjointed project. I think was referenced earlier, having some in the wetland that I was more amenable towards, because then we're not going against the, you know, putting in otherwise developable area to some degree at least. You know, my thought had been, you know, utilize the wetland, maybe that's a non-starter, I don't know. And then put the remainder kind of in this area as much as you can, kind of tucked away. Then you maintain the remainder of this area to the best of your degree, and it gets it away from Mr. Lamper. Probably puts it towards the neighbors over here a little more, but there's probably pretty decent screening on this area, and some could be done here even.
Tom, does that sound like something you could work with? Like the next 30 days, get some reconfiguration and try to work out the glitches?
I'm okay with that, yes.
Okay.
Do we want to do any of the variances now? I mean, we need the 3/4 mile radius, and we're gonna need some roadway ones. Do we want to handle any of those now, so we have some indication that you guys are moving in that direction, or?
You want to do it partially now and do the 3/4 mile?
It's up to you.
That would be appreciated.
I can say I would expect the city council would probably, for a single project, they'd want to see it probably all come together as a package, would be my assumption. I understand it probably helps you to have something, but my inkling is that they would want to see anything that may come across be all together and ironed out at once.
My inclination is that the 3/4 mile from another project would be much more palatable to the city council, for the simple fact that this one will be screened, the other ones are not. You know, this one won't be seen, the other ones are. So I think that, I would think common sense would say that they would be more acceptable of that variance than.
Well, and keep in mind too, from staff perspective, when you're looking at, you know, these are significant variances to the ordinance, and it has to be defensible for anything else that may come across, because, you know, this is one property, but what of the others that are nearby that remain developable? How do you know, what's the justification to say no if they decide they want to do this too, especially if there is a ongoing interest? Now, granted, those properties are zoned a different district that doesn't allow for solar, but there's nothing to say that they couldn't request a rezoning in the same way this is having a variance requested. I just want to go on the record that this opens up a slippery slope for us if we're not careful. If the desire of the planning commission and or city council wishes to go that way, that's their discretion, but you know, this could open a pathway for other projects to come forward at some point as well, so just be warned.
Well, I think Vic made a motion to table it for 30 days, for a month. I would second that motion.
We got a motion and a second to table it for a month. All in favor, saying aye.
Aye.
Motion tabled.
And we would expect for everybody that barring anything unforeseen, and if that would happen, we would issue We'll probably issue a extension of the 60-day rule just for good measure. We're still well within our timeline to review. We would expect this would come back on Tuesday, October 10th. But
Just for the record, I will not be in town on October 10th either. I'm not going to be here in October unless, you know.
Then it
we have
relies to you three to make sure you can be here if we want to go forward with that. Otherwise, we could extend it out further if we needed to, if for some
We'd have to
reason.
extend it to November. I know I won't be here in October.
We don't have to necessarily decide that right now, but if for some reason that, because we're still down a member, if the three remaining members, Bob's gonna be out of town, if you're not able to, if one of you isn't able to make it, we don't have a quorum and we're not able to proceed, so we'd have to reschedule. But I think as of right now, we'll assume that you can.
Be advised that the possibility is there that it could be stretched out till November. I mean. Understood. Because we're one member short here right now.
Hopefully that won't be the case for long, but we have to work with what we have.
Thank you. Well, thank everyone for coming, and thank you for your patience.
Just a brief update from me for just a minute. We were looking, this is kind of reference to, we were looking at having an open house with the city council, planning commission, park board, kind of our public input session for anybody that wants to attend, as well as all the folks that would be invited that participated in that, the kind of the long-term visioning session last year. Wrapping that up with regards to the kind of the current draft comprehensive plan that's rolling out. We'll get you guys all a copy of that. We're gonna put it live here pretty quick. We had that scheduled tentatively for October 2nd. I believe that it's a Monday, but it'll be a kind of informal. Our folks from SEH will be in attendance to kind of discuss the draft comprehensive plan.
So you know I won't be there either for that one.
That's fine. That's okay. But thank you for letting me know.
What time is that gonna be at, John?
TBD right now, if you just want to put a pin in it.
Okay.
But probably in the, probably 5 to 7 range. And then we would look to having the comprehensive plan potentially at the October meeting as well for planning commission. And just one other brief update, I know we discussed our technology stuff at the last meeting. We're gonna go ahead and I think we're just gonna make, for anybody that wants an iPad or a laptop, we'll make one available. Otherwise, we're just gonna transition to using the online Outlook portal. Basically, you log in, it's just a website you can bookmark. You can log in, get your city emails from there. You don't need to have a separate device or a separate account. And we're gonna move towards just doing more of that. And what I'll do is I'll just send you guys maybe a text or something, just to let you know, hey, we sent an email, if you wanna check it. We'll still do the paper packets as long as you want, but, just to be sure we're kind of on track with the email stuff. And, from what I understand, I use it myself a little bit, but not too much. The online Outlook portal is very easy to use. It's just click on it, enter your password, we'll give you your city password, and it comes up just like an email account. Pretty straightforward. That's just a couple updates I had.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, second.
Second.
Motion and second to adjourn, all in favor, so saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.